thing I want to talk about, which is the power of your mind and just how amazingly powerful your mind is. I read somewhere that if you took all the neurons in the brain and laid them out end to end, that they would reach to the moon and and back again, which is just mind-boggling to me. And it weighs like a little over 3 pounds, and it's capable of doing all these absolutely amazing things. And why the mind is so powerful in sports psychology is wherever the mind goes, the body gets right in behind and follows it. And so mental toughness, to me, is all about what are you allowing your mind to do? How have you trained your mind? Have you trained your mind to go off on tangents and negativity and allow negative feedback? Or have you strengthened your mind to focus in on exactly what it is you want it to focus in on? Mindfulness is one of the key tools that I use in my work with athletes, and my definition of mindfulness is an awareness of what's going on when it's going on. You know, if an athlete is lined up is behind the starting line at the 100 meters at the Olympic trials and they've got butterflies in their stomach and it's hard to breathe a little bit, mindfulness would make them aware of that and they would learn how to work their way through that. It's like a third-person observer taking another version of themselves and learning how to watch themselves do what they do when they're doing it. I'm noticing that I'm focusing on my opponent. I've noticed that I'm allowing myself to be intimidated by how quick this person might be. Their forehand is better than mine, or their backhand is better than mine. Or I noticed that I just had that reaction, but I noticed I just let that reaction go and I breathed and I calmed myself down and I'm resilient and I'm strong again. So it's all about how you use mindfulness and awareness. I do an exercise with the athletes. I have a wristband. I have one on right now. It says Mind of a Champion. And I give every athlete that I work with one of these wristbands, and they're to wear it for at least 7 days, ideally 30 days. Most of them just keep wearing them. But anytime they think something negative that creates doubt or stress or anxiety, erodes self-confidence, they have to take the wristband off, put it on the other wrist, and then change the thought into something positive or change that statement into something positive. And a lot of them, the first 3 days, they're just wearing themselves out because they didn't realize how negative that they were about things. So learning how to train the mind to create that mental toughness that we talk about. Excuse me. The other thing I like to talk about is, along the lines of this energy utilization, is stress. And my favorite definition of stress that I like to use is I keep a set of dumbbells in my office, and they're 30-pound dumbbells. So if I walk over there to pick up a 30-pound dumbbell, I have to use 30 pounds of force to pick that dumbbell up, right? If I use 31 pounds of force to pick that dumbbell up, that extra pound is stress. And so what stresses athletes out is, or even parents in the stands, is when you're using more energy than you need to use in a given situation. And that's what performance stress and pressure is, when you're allowing yourself to use more energy than you need to. And I see amazing performances all the time, and the most beautiful performances are those that just seem to flow because they're just based on efficiency, grace. And so learning how to recognize how much energy that you're using at any given time, and if you're using too much, make adjustments. Annette, we're already about 20, 25 minutes in. You want to take a pause here and do some question and answer before we move into injuries?
Sure. Yes. I would like to do that. Robert's kind of opening it up right now for the moms to ask questions about mental toughness and some of the things he's gone over. I guess one of the questions I have, Robert, is as far as the paradigm with the coach and their feedback to the athletes, which is sometimes negative. Mm-hmm. Most athletes that perform at a high level kind of know how to block that out. Mm-hmm. But for the ones that struggle with it, do you have anything that you recommend to the athletes?
I do, and I learned this from a college cross-country runner that I worked with. He found it to be very, very helpful, and I borrowed it from him and used it for years. You're right. You know, if it's an NFL player, they're kind of used to tough coaches. I work with the Texans, and they send me a lot of their players. And NFL coaches, they don't do a lot of praising. They do a lot of correcting. So learning how to just take that feedback and not let it rock you too much is critical the higher you go. But if you're in junior high or high school or even college, it's important to learn how to do that. And so what this cross-country runner said was he was going out for a 7-mile run. He was having trouble with his knee. He wasn't in the condition that he wanted to be in. And he would get exhausted on his runs because he would just dwell on negative thoughts the whole run. And so we met our first session, and he was going to go run 7 miles on a Saturday morning. He went and ran. He came back in the next week, and he said, I figured something out. He said, every time I thought a negative thought, I just imagined that I ran by it, just like I would a bench in the park or a tree or a stop sign. He said I would just notice the thought, and I would breathe my way right through it and imagine that the thought just passed right on by. I would let it breathe right through me, and I kept bringing my attention back to the run. And he said my knee pain went away, my sides quit hurting, and he said it was the easiest 7 miles I've ever run. And so I find that to be an effective one, is just to notice the thought. Just be mindful and be aware of the thought and breathe it right on through you. And I've get great feedback from athletes that's been a great tool for them. And then the breathing, you ever heard of belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, breathing through your stomach to where your diaphragm goes down? So when you have a reaction to a negative comment like that, your body's going to respond to that. So you notice the stress and breathe through your diaphragm to calm that down. Does that help, Annette?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Other parents any other moms have questions about the mental toughness as we talked about?
I just have a question about, I just had a question about the 4-legged stool. I got 3 legs, so I have the athlete, the parent, the coach, and what was the 4th, sir?
The culture, and you're probably going to say the agent.
The agent or the culture, right?
The agent. Well, the 3 that I had on there are the parent, the athlete, the coach, and the culture.
Okay.
But if you're dealing with a professional athlete, you might as well throw the agent in there too.
Okay.
And the further athletes get along in college, sometimes they listen more to the agent than they do the coach. So I'll have to add that into my 5-legged stool now when I talk to parents of professional athletes and coaches.
That's very true.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody else?
Yes, sir. This is Michael Scott. I had a question concerning what is a good time to talk to the athletes about their performance?
That was one of the things I was going to talk about in parents. In my family, we started out with we called it the 2-hour rule, where after the game we wouldn't talk about anything negative. What was it like? Why did you strike out with bases loaded? Or what was going on with your curveball tonight? Or Abby, you fell on beam. We did this 2-hour thing, and then that just kind of grew into overnight. We would all sleep on it at night. And then it got to where sometimes we talked about it and sometimes we didn't, but we definitely didn't talk about it as soon as they got in the car or as soon as they got off the bus or got back to the hotel or got home or whatever that was, because what I learned was my kids were harder on themselves than I could ever be, and it just compounded things. So we gave everybody a chance to decompress, process it, and what happened was I found that by sleeping on it at night, everybody was like, yeah, that was tough last night. My slider just wasn't popping the way it usually does, or I felt great on 3 events, or my serve wasn't working, or whatever it is. So I don't recommend right after. They need time to integrate, to process, to decompress. They might, if it was a bad performance, they're probably already hearing it in the locker room or on the sidelines. So we're going to talk a little bit about that under the parent section, and that falls under the concept of draining or filling up their emotional tank or their emotional reservoir. You have to make sure that when you approach them, it's going to be at a time when you can help them recharge their battery or fill their tank up. If you go in too soon, you drain them, they get defensive, mumble at you, grumble a little bit. We've all been there. So it's about finding the opportune time to talk about them. And, these aren't absolutes. It's different with every athlete. Some athletes might want to sit down before they go to bed and say, Mom or Dad, tonight I was horrible, and I need to talk about it. But that's not always the case.
Okay.
Anyone else before? You betcha. Anyone else before we move on to injuries?
I have a question. This is Andrea, and maybe you might be planning to address this later as well, but how do you work with the athletes that you work with and help them? Because it seems hard to imagine that you talk to them and they all of a sudden become positive.
Oh, really?
It does, but maybe you can explain to me.
Do you mean in what format, or what are the tools and technologies that I use, or am I using it in my office or Skype? I need a little bit more information about your question.
Well, I mean, really, all my question is really broad, but I guess, are you able to just have a conversation with the athletes that you work with and teach them techniques to change their thought patterns, or is it sort of like therapy that you're offering, or is
yes to all the above. I mean, it's not a one-session kind of thing in most instances, although I've had athletes come in and say, I got exactly what I needed, I'm ready to go. It's a combination of things. It's mindfulness, it's awareness, it's watching your mindset, it's learning how to listen to what your body's trying to tell you, it's learning how to calm yourself down emotionally. I always say oxygen is the antidote to stress and pressure, learning how to breathe the right way, learning how to, and a lot of times learning how to calm down situations. Like I had a situation with an athlete this year who moved in from out of state, moved into the number one position on their team. They were really, really good. Their teammates started treating them really badly, making fun of them, excluding them, so they adapted to get along and quit being themselves. Their performance suffered. They came to see me. So in this case, it was about them learning how to handle bullying and learning how to handle gossip and learning how to be more assertive and aggressive. And most importantly, it was about learning how to be themselves again. And in their sport, they rebounded, ended up being the fourth best in their event in the state of Texas. And they said it was because they learned how to handle all those things that were coming at them. They quit adapting. So I look at whatever needs to happen. But as a segue into injuries, the first place I always look is, have you suffered a serious injury?
So, Robert, can I stop for a minute and ask
Sure.
the moms that if you're not speaking or asking a question, can you please place your phone on mute so we don't have the background noise? Thanks. And I do have one question before you segue into your next session.
Okay.
A topic. So, and I think it goes to the mom that just asked the question. So, and not just how do you work? Do you work with athletes one-on-one? Do you do group? And is it face-to-face only? Can you use your techniques via phone or Skype or using technology? How do you use your techniques? How do you work with the athletes?
I work with them one-on-one in my office. I work with Major League Baseball and NFL players from all over the country, and I've worked with judo athletes and track and field athletes. You know, I've actually Skyped with someone in the Philippines one time that was over there for a judo competition. So I use FaceTime, Skype, one-on-one time in the office. All the performance work that I do can be done Skype, FaceTime. Part of the work I do with injuries can be done over the phone or Skype or FaceTime. Some of the eidetic imagery work that we do to train their brain to create a new pathway or new imagery around their injury. But I use the process with really horrible, like if somebody misses 2 free throws to send the game into overtime in the Elite Eight, and they just can't get over that, or they miss a key field goal, or they've had a catastrophic injury, I use a process called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, that teaches the brain how to process high-stress events. And they've used these with natural disasters and horrific things that have happened and that we read in the news all the time. And so I received training in those techniques 18, 19 years ago, And so I use them with I call them big, giant log jams of negative information rolling around in that athlete's brain. And it teaches the brain how to process information very, very quickly. And I've seen the worst of the worst injuries that you could imagine and seen athletes just bounce back and they say, I don't even think about it anymore. I just go out and play again.
So
is that a good...
Yeah, that's great to know because our moms are all over the country. So if they are interested in hearing more, working with you, it's not that we would have to necessarily bring our athletes to you, but there are ways to get the benefit of having you coach them or counsel them without actually having to come to your office. So that's where I was going.
Yeah, I got off the phone. One NFL guy I work with played Friday night, and we talked at 2:30 for 30 minutes, and then he went out and played that night. And he'll text me this week and let me know what his schedule is, and we'll set up another 30 minutes because that's the time window that he has. He can't spend an hour on the phone with me, but we do little 30-minute shots whenever we can. And he's doing great. You know, he likes that format. And so whatever we need to do to make it work. I also travel. I've had athletes from New England and California and Colorado fly down to work with me for a couple of days. I just had a lacrosse player come in and a soccer player from New England and one from up in Wisconsin just came in with ACL injuries. So, whatever it takes, we can make it happen.
Awesome.
So how about injuries? I love talking about injuries. We're ready to go there?
Go to injuries, and moms, if you could put...
I'm sorry, go to injuries and... Hello?
I think Jackie might have dropped off, but I think we can continue with the next topic, and then if there are any additional questions that come up, we'll come back around for additional questions.
Annette, I had one quick question. This is Chandra. Hi, Robert. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm just trying to find out, as far as the referral goes, with the athlete have to have a referral from their actual coach, or is this something that the parent can identify?
The athlete, the parent, there doesn't have to be referral from the coach. And interesting, a lot of times professional athletes don't want their coaches to know for different reasons. I think it's that sports psychology stigma, and I'm not in favor of that. I think the more we can normalize this, the more it's going to be accessible to athletes. But, whoever wants to pick up the phone, really, unless they're a minor, have to have parental position then, or permission then. But whoever wants to make it happen, the athlete, the parent. But the athlete does need to buy in, because I have athletes come to see me that sit there with their arms folded the whole time and won't answer any questions because they don't want to be there. So there has to be a buy-in, obviously, from the athlete for it to work. Okay, injuries. Here we go, okay? Sports injuries. In 7th grade, I grew 9 inches in a year. I had Osgood-Schlatters disease. I couldn't play any sports all of 7th grade, and that was a devastating time because my parents were going through a separation. I didn't have sports to rely on. In 9th grade, I suffered a concussion and broke my arm and separated my shoulder. My sophomore year, I hurt my knee and tore 3 ligaments, a cartilage, ruptured the fluid capsule, strained the patellar tendon. In college, I suffered another separated shoulder. That's when I quit sports in the spring game of football. I said, that's enough. So I've learned a lot about sports injuries. I was terrified of getting hurt again after I hurt my knee, but I kept playing. I played on a state championship high school football team. I was highly recruited by Texas, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, some really good schools. But when they found out how bad my knee was, the scholarships went away. So that was a heartbreaker for me. So I've seen the impact of injuries. I've lived it. I feel like and I don't mean this to sound arrogant, but I don't feel like there's anybody better on the planet with sports injuries than me, because I know firsthand the devastation, and I know how to get back from them, and I'm really good at helping athletes and their families overcome them. So you hear this notion that says so-and-so has been cleared and is 100% ready to play. You've all heard that, right? In the papers and the news, on the pregame report for NFL teams or whatever it might be, a baseball player has cleared from Tommy John player and is 100%. Well, that's just a physical definition. That's range of motion and strength and flexibility and all that. They're not just physical in nature. When an athlete is injured, there's intense physical pain. There's surges of emotion that surge through their system. There's surges of adrenaline. There's imagery associated with the imagery or the injury. If you ask any of your athletes who suffered a serious sports-related injury, they can tell you exactly the image that pops into their mind. I'm laying on the ground and I can't move. I'm looking up and the trainer's standing over me trying to tell me it's going to be okay. Or I remember feeling the pop in my knee. Or I threw a curveball and I felt the pop and I can remember that sound and what it felt like. And that image is loaded with information, emotion, sensation. I've had athletes tell me I can remember the smell of the grass on the playing field. I can remember the lights. I remember how quiet the stands got. I worked with a college player from Michigan who can remember the smell of the concession foods when he was walking in a cart going off the field into the tunnel. So those images are loaded with neurological, sensory information, emotion, light, sound. And so what the brain does with that, fear, anxiety, confusion, it just locks all that information away in the brain and it just sits there. And so we find out that, it's an ACL or it's a Tommy John ligament, you need surgery. So now they have to face the prospect of having surgery. So the neocortex, which is the part of the brain that is about mastery and excellence, shuts down in the limbic system, which is a primitive part of our brain that's about keeping us safe and alive. It takes over because it's about survival to that part of the brain. So the primitive limbic system kicks in, they get through the surgery process, and I've had 2 knee surgeries and total knee replacement surgery. And knee surgeries hurt. They just hurt, especially certain types of ACL injuries. So then they say, okay, let's start the rehab process. So they start off and all they can do is fire their muscle 5% or 10%, hold it for 5 seconds. That's how it was after my knee. All I could lift was a 2.5-pound weight up. That's all I could do. Now I ride a bike and I do all the things that I've wanted to do for years because I hurt my knee when I was 15 years old and I'm 56 now. And I had knee surgery almost 2 years ago. So things to look for because there's this huge surge of information. The brain compartmentalizes that information. When the athlete goes to make that cut, that part of the brain opens up and releases that information. So their brain won't let them throw the pitch, or they're afraid to make the cut where they planted, or they went up for the layup and their knee buckled. So they think about that consciously and unconsciously. Now, there are rare events like Adrian Peterson last year had a serious knee injury, and I worked with a guy in the off season who trains with Adrian Peterson, and he said Adrian Peterson is a freak when it comes to mental toughness. And when the doctor said, your knee's fine, we repaired it, he said, it's on now. And he started his rehab, and he was 9 yards away from having the best rushing season in NFL history. But he's a rare bird. Most athletes, 65% of all athletes who suffer ACL injuries don't return to play, and many don't return to a previous level of play. And I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of ACL injuries, and I have had 2 athletes that completed my process treatment model have tear their ACL again. And those 2 athletes only saw me one time and said, I don't need to go back. I don't need to do that. And then their parents called me months later and said they tore their ACL again. So things to look for: shut down, quiet, turn inward, changes in their social life, loss of drive and passion, anxiety favoring the injured area, hesitation, avoidance of returning to training, fear upon returning to training, anger, depression. Those are some of the warning signs that I see and that what parents and athletes report. I talked earlier about imagery. Imagery is a holographic imprint. It's alive with information. All the senses are involved in an injury. If anybody watched the Texans and the Miami Dolphins play last night, there was a horrific knee injury. And when I saw it, I told my wife, I said, that's a bad one. Well, it was. He tore 3 ligaments, a cartilage. It could be career-ending. It was a receiver. I can't remember his name. But you could tell he was hurting, and he was holding on to his jersey and wincing. But the more time went by, as they got him onto the cart and wheeled him off, he was given a thumbs up and all that. Well, all these different chemicals start working into his system to distance him from the enormity of what he was going through. And then sometimes they go into shock. So memory is present on a sensory, visual, and emotional level. The more intense the injury, the more complex the imagery involved, and sometimes more images are involved with more intense injuries. I've had athletes tell me, I can remember the play where I got hurt, I can remember being carted off the field, I can remember the trainer and the doctor saying we think it's the ACL, I can remember getting a phone call from the doctor after they read my MRI saying it's an ACL. I remember how much pain I was in after surgery, and then going to practice on crutches and watching. Those were all representative images of the worst part of their ACL injury. So they're traumatic in nature, and a lot of people kind of cringe when I use that word. But if we talk about self-confidence and belief, there's nothing that rocks an athlete's self-confidence and belief in themselves than a devastating injury like that. So treatment, the way I treat injuries, and I'm reading off of a PowerPoint presentation that I go out and work with doctors and trainers and do this presentation and just to educate them on that there's so much more to sports injuries than just the physical component of it. And what I didn't talk about was concussions, and I want to hit upon that very quickly. Concussions have a psychological, mental, and emotional component as well. And the current treatment model is to just turn the brain off and let it rest. Don't play computer games, don't study, don't watch TV, stay in a dark room, and that's all necessary. But I have found that using some varied techniques that I've used for 18 or 19 years, I've found concussion symptoms diminish dramatically. And I just had a guy in town, a former NFL quarterback, who quit because he had a concussion, came into my office, and his father brought a piece of equipment that measures the moderation or severity of a concussion, and we did a pre-treatment measurement and then a post-treatment measurement and sent it off to this organization that has created this thing, and we're waiting on their findings to come back to see if we can scientifically prove that this helps with concussions, because I've asked 3 doctors to research it with me and they won't. So I'm just throwing that out there that we might be on the threshold of releasing some information that's going to change the whole playing field with concussions. And so I'll keep you posted on that. So treatment, I use eidetic imagery or a process called rescripting, where they go back and rerun the play in their mind to create a positive outcome, and then there's homework around that. It gives the brain a new target or new image to focus on, and that in itself lowers anxiety and fear of reading. And like I said earlier, I use this eye movement desensitization or reprocessing, which it's a process that rapidly accesses the right and left hemispheres of the brain with light or sound, light and sound, and that they have found that accesses this limbic system in the brain that teaches the brain how to process stress and fear and anxiety very, very quickly. So that's injuries in a nutshell. That's the 10-minute version of a hour-long presentation that I do. So any questions about injuries?
I have one question.
Yes.
This is Heather Allen. You talked about the neocortex of the brain that shuts down because of ACL injuries. Why is that percentage so high? You said 65% give up. Why is that percentage so high?
I got that number from one of the leading ACL orthopedic surgeons in the country, and we've been talking for a year and a half about doing a research study on the psychological recovery process of ACL injuries. I think because, and that was his number, and I trust this guy big time.
It's high. It's awfully high.
It sounds very high, doesn't it? And I was really surprised by that number too. But that's the number that he gave me, and he said he wants to lower that number. Well, I think I usually see ACL injuries when it's rare that I get to see them before they ever have surgery, and if I can, it makes a tremendous difference in their recovery process. I see them when they're coming in, and everybody says they're okay, and they've been cleared as 100%, and they just can't come back, and they're afraid of getting hurt again, and they shut down, and their performance isn't where it should be. And I see 0.05 of all the ACL injuries in the country, probably. You know, I mean, I don't see very many of them relative to how many sports-related injuries there are that require surgery, especially ACL injuries. I wish that I could train people all over the country and work with ACL or Tommy John or whatever kind of sports-related injuries before surgery, right after surgery, and then right before they go back to train again. Because I think we'd see that number just drop down to.
I agree. I was going to say that there's definitely a need for what you do. Since that number is so high. I totally agree. It would be great if there were more professionals out there.
Well, I've got we're going to be opening an Institute of Sports Psychology in Dallas, and then I've got a woman here that might be coming in with me, and she's interested in moving to Florida. So I would say Dallas will be opening up in October, and Florida will be open up probably in the next year or two. So, you know, we're going to be moving this work out. Absolutely. But that, I agree, that 65% was very alarming, but you take into account that how many athletes suffer injuries and they're cleared, but they're just, I was that way. You know, back in my days, rehab was just strengthening your quad and go play football again, go run track again.
Right.
Back in the dark ages of knee surgery. And so I was terrified. And one of the reasons I quit playing, because I was just afraid of getting hurt. I was just tired of being scared. But, you know, I was 20, 21 years old. And so you think about the rare birds that get to go see somebody that can help them overcome the psychological impact of an injury, and I think it makes sense that there's a lot of people that drop out. The other part of it is a lot of times they don't perform as well because they hesitate. And there's been a half a dozen times when I've called a doctor or a coach or a trainer on Monday and said, your offensive lineman or your running back is going to tear their other knee up. And they said, well, why? And I said, because they don't trust the knee that's been repaired. They're favoring, I can tell. And 6 times they've torn the other knee when I predicted it. Wow. And again, I'm not saying that to sound cocky or arrogant. I've just seen it. I know what I'm looking at.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
It's a fascinating topic. It really is.
I agree.
Robert, I have a question. So for an athlete that's coming back from injury, do you recommend they go through an assessment or just wait until after they get back into the full speed of the sport and then determine where there might be opportunities at?
It depends on the athlete. I would say the high percentage of them, I would recommend doing some kind of work around what happened on the actual play, or if it's overuse or overtime injury, what their hesitation might be or something like that. But like I said, most of them come find me because they are afraid of getting hurt, or they're terrified, or they're just hesitant, and you know, coaches are yelling at them, you know, what's wrong with you? Just throw the baseball. Or, you know, you broke your ankle on vault. Just go over the vault. Why can't you vault? And so they're scared and they're frustrated and they're devastated and they're ashamed. But that part of their brain, its job is to keep them safe. So it just won't let them do it.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, Robert. Jackie Walker out of Atlanta, Georgia. And my question is, I've noticed that there has been a very high increase in females getting ACL and meniscus tears. Do you have any information on why that is?
I do, and I worked with the college team one year that had 6 ACL injuries in 13 days. And it was my own case study because I saw 3 of them before surgery, 2 of them after surgery, and 1 I didn't see at all. So I got to watch what happened when they got to play. And the one that got ready to go back to play that I never got to see, she finally said, I need to go see him. I'm terrified. And what I've heard is it has to do with the angle from the hips down to the knee that creates an irregular torque on the knee joints. I've also read a research study that said after a girl's menstrual cycle that it changes hormonal flow throughout the body that weakens ligaments and tendons in the body, so they're working on doing things with nutrition and diet. They're also doing training to strengthen certain muscles that have been vulnerable that might be, let's say an adductor is too strong and an adductor is weak, so they're balancing out. In volleyball, they teach them how to land a certain way that prevents ACL injuries. So, That's what I've been hearing, is that there's just certain things that are particular to girls that guys don't experience.
Thank you for that. I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to, I know you mentioned that 65%. Are we talking about, does that include adults? Is it, young children? Is it high school? What does that 65% consist of?
The information, as I received it, was, I would say, I wouldn't include adults in that mix. I would say, junior high, high school, college, professional athletes who suffer ACL injuries are not returning to play, 65%. And I'll email him and ask him for that study, and if I find it, I'll email it to Annette, and y'all can read it yourself, because I was really shocked by that number too. Right. But I do not believe that it included adults.
Okay. And what can we do as parents? Because I know with my own daughter, there does seem there's either some depression of not wanting to do the physical therapy outside of going. It's a constant, reminder of doing that. So what can we do as parents to increase that support of, I guess, for them in regards to the injury and, pushing forward?
Well, what a lot of athletes have told me is they hesitate doing therapy because if I get better, what's going to happen? Well, they're going to put me back out there again. And if they put me back out there again, I could get hurt again. And that's largely unconscious a lot of the time. So that's part of the conscious and unconscious resistance in that. And I know teenage kids, because I have them, and a lot of kids in their 20s, they don't know how to talk about or process emotions, so they either act them out or act them in. And what I mean by that is they either turn very inward and get quiet, or they act them out. They get angry or frustrated or passive-aggressive. And so, one of the things we learned with our kids was to sit down and talk to them with feeling words, like it must be really hard to try to come back from an ACL injury. It must be really sad to be disconnected for your team, or it must be really frustrating to only be able to lift 20 pounds with your leg or something like that. To just sit down and try to have a conversation with them about it and pick and choose your moments. And if they need somebody to talk to, a lot of universities have sports psychologists on staff, so there's people that they can go talk to, and some professional teams do too. So, find them resources, because it's, I've been there. It's a tough thing, and it's a lot tougher than what people think. And what really compounds it is when they see an athlete come back and do what amazing things like what Adrian Peterson did. It's like, God, what's wrong with me? Why couldn't I do that? And that compounds the problem. So just put your arms around them and sit down with them. And I've had athletes who can't talk about it. Sometimes they can't put words to it, so I have them write it out. Tell me what's going on. I give them a stack of paper and a pen, and their hands just writing and writing and writing.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that information. That was really good.
Thank you. Do y'all want to talk a little bit about parents? Oh, yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is Shannon Coleman. And I'm wondering, you mentioned that college programs have sports athletes, psychologists on staff.
Some.
Is that 100% of the time? Do some colleges have it and some don't? And shouldn't there be a requirement when an athlete has a serious injury that they have some type of interaction with that sports psychiatrist?
Well, in the NFL they do. They have somebody that they send them to. It's an NFL guideline that they go talk with somebody just to see how they're handling that. And then here in Houston, the Texans, if they have somebody that's really struggling coming back, they'll send them over to me, and I'll do my treatment model. Now, I know universities like Oklahoma and LSU and Michigan, Auburn, Stanford, schools like that have sports psychologists on staff, and I think all you have to do is just talk to your trainer and say, I want to go talk to our sports psych about, you don't even have to tell them about what, but not all schools do. And again, it's just the schools with the big budgets that put 90 and 100,000 people in the stands, because I know here locally, Rice, U of H, and Houston Baptist University don't have a sports psychologist on staff. But, you know, I've been to a University of Michigan game with 113,000 people, so they have it in their budget. So it just depends on the school. Kansas State, I know, does. Arizona.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So just a few minutes on parents. How does that sound?
Great. Awesome.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. One of the things I talk about with athletes, and I'm going to hit these real quick because we're getting right at the hour, but one of the things I help athletes do is find what we call their peak performance zone. What's just the right amount of intensity and pressure and neurological arousal that they need to be under to play at their absolute best. Like when my son pitches, he's what we call a 7. A 0 means there's no intensity, no pressure at all. A 10 is as high as you can stand it. When he throws at a 7, he's a really good pitcher. And when he pitches at a 4 or 5, he's not the same pitcher. And when he throws at a 9-10, he's not the same pitcher. But at a 7, he's the real deal. So he knows that, okay? So what I tell parents is parents have what I call a peak enjoyment zone. It means there's a certain amount of intensity that you have when you get the full enjoyment out of enjoying your kids do what they do. If you're playing on your iPad and not really plugged in, your enjoyment level isn't in your zone. And if you're angry and screaming and yelling because they're not getting playing time or poor calls or whatever, then you're too intense and you're not getting your peak enjoyment zone. So let's go back to mindfulness again. Learning how to be aware of what's going on with you when you're in the stands helps you create more enjoyment, all right? And someone asked earlier about when should I talk to my son or daughter about a performance. And I always say when you can pick a time where that you think that conversation will help fill their tank back up again. Because if it's a bad performance, their tank is drained. It's been emptied. And so if your conversation is going to go in there and drain it more, that's not the time to have it. And if it's going to the way that you're interacting with them is going to drain it, well, then find a way to interact with them that's going to fill it back up again. So there's a mental and emotional reservoir in every athlete. And as parents, it's our job to help them fill it up, especially in tough times. So I hope that helps answer that question that was asked earlier in the conversation. So here's a couple of bullet points, okay? Get support and connect with other parents who are on the same path as you. That's what you're about in your organization. I think it's wonderful. Seek out knowledge and information on different situations you were involved in, the recruiting process, the NFL draft, the WNBA draft, whatever that might be, going to the World Championships, going to a bowl game, find out how it works. My experience in the London Olympics was a lot easier than the experience in Beijing, China, mainly because of the language difference, but also because I had been there and done that before, okay? Utilize mindfulness and be aware of what's going on with you in intense moments. Use the 24-hour rule. If it's an intense negative conversation, sleep on it. Give yourself a little bit of time to decompress. When faced with a difficult situation or event, sleep on it the night before you react. Don't try to handle difficult things when you're charged up or irrational. And recognize that as your athlete matures and expands their career, your role as a parent needs to be changing and adjusting too. I worked with a high-level athlete who's, the further they went in their sport, now they were a teenage athlete, but world-class, the further they went in their sport, the more their parents clamped down on this athlete and more restrictions and no, you can't do that and you can't go out and do this. And I said, look, this is an Olympic hopeful athlete. They've got to start learning life skills. You've got to start backing away. You've got to start letting go. You've got to let them go out and bump into life a little bit, because if they don't do that, they're not going to be able to handle being an Olympic medalist or an Olympic champion or the Olympic pressure or the Olympic trials. So you have to move and change and evolve just like your athlete does. So those are my parent bullet points. We're at an hour and 4 minutes. Annette, so how's that?
No, that sounds great, and we do want to provide an opportunity for the parents to ask questions. Robert, you've done such a great job presenting the information, and it's very relevant and beneficial to all of us that have athletes performing. So can we take a few minutes, Robert? Do you have time
Oh, yeah.
Quick question.
I'm just going to go watch the men's gymnastics championships after this, so I'm good.
Before we ask questions, let me just ask for the couple parents that joined after we took roll, can you please provide your name?
Yes, my name is Leroy Ricks, Chesapeake, Virginia.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else join?
Yes, and that is
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, young lady.
Darnita Smith from Chesapeake, Virginia.
Okay, thank you. And who else joined?
Yes, of course, this is Michael Scott, of course, also from Chesapeake, Virginia.
Okay, great. Thanks,
Go
Mike,
Virginia.
for sending it out to your parents. All right, so we're going to go back to the question series. Are there any questions, Moms? And it could be from any of the three topics that we talked about. It doesn't necessarily have to be the last topic, because I know we were kind of trying to move forward, so we wouldn't miss any key important points.
So I have a question, and I just wanted to let Robert know you did a great job. Thank you so much. This is Jackie Gibbs. Also, we have moms that have their athletes there. We did invite moms to have their athletes come and hear you speak. So my question is, or just asking if you would do this, what would you want to say your top three things you would want the athletes to take away from your conversation tonight?
Wow, that's a great question.
Do you want to think about it and come at the end and tell us, or?
No, I just taken a deep centering breath, just like I would tell an athlete to do, and thinking about your question and getting balanced out here. So I'm using some sports psychology techniques prior to answering your question. The first and foremost thing I think it would be to just go out and have fun. Every athlete that I ask, why did you start tennis or gymnastics or football? Because it was fun. And then I'll say, well, when did it quit being fun? Well, when this happened or this happened. And then we work to make it fun again. So go out and do whatever you need to do to make it fun again and inject passion back into the game. And the other thing that I would say is develop a very strong, clear, positive mental attitude and thought process about your training and be mindful about that. And then the third thing would be hyper aware of the choices that you make and the decisions that you make and the things that you say yes and no to. Are those things feeding your goals? If they're not feeding your goals, learn how to say no, because I think there's a lot of athletes that get into trouble because they say yes to things that they don't know how to say no to, or they say yes to things that don't help them meet their goals. I've turned down working with certain organizations because I know there's a clash of cultures. I've resigned from working with certain organizations because there's a clash of cultures, and I know that that's not in line with my mission and my goal about creating excellence and beauty in the world of sports. So those are the three big hits that I would suggest.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I extend an invitation to everyone?
Sure.
If you Google the Institute of Sports Psychology, my website will show up, and there is a place on there for it says blog on the far right banner, the top right. It'll say blog. You can click blog, and then you can sign up for my blog. And I try to do a newsletter about once a month. This summer I've been real busy, so I don't think I've put one out in a while, but they're always really good, and a lot of my old ones are on there. You can go back and read about injuries. You can read about distractions. You can read about all kinds of things. So feel free to sign up on that. There's no cost to it. You'll get an email from me every now and then with some great topic about I made a commitment to a coach to write something about parenting elite athletes or parenting athletes. The other thing is if any of you would want to be interviewed for what it's like parenting a high-level athlete, I have another website called Parenting Elite Athletes where I interview parents, and there's a series of questions that we go through. And it's just part of this resource of providing information to parents like you. So be happy to have you on either one of those. Any other questions?
Do you have any books that you would recommend that kind of support some of the theories that you have discussed?
I always recommend Mind Gym, Mind, and then GYM. That's a really good book. The Power of Full Engagement is an awesome book. And I don't remember the authors' names, but those are two really, really good ones that I recommend. I wish I could say mine, but I have one I'm in process now on. It's a performance book, and then I'm going to write one on the treatment model I use for sports injuries. But those two are two that I've recommended for years.
Okay, great. Thanks, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the moms? It could be from any of the three topics he's talked about: the injuries, the mental toughness, and tips for parents.
Hello, Annette, this is a question for you. The information that Robert has provided tonight, will you have access to the information after this conference call?
I took notes on what he discussed. Robert, do you have anything you can share with us that we can put on the website, or do you just want me to just do the notes that of me paraphrasing what you discussed?
I sat down this morning and it's about 2.5 pages of information that I just put together on topics that I wanted to get over to you. So I'll email that to you, and feel free to share that if you like.
Okay, and then I'll also summarize some of the discussion points in the meeting as well to add more detail.
But a lot of what like I said earlier, a lot of the information is on my website. It's in the blogs that I've written about. The other thing is there's some great testimonials on there from injured athletes and performance athletes, and so take a look at that. It's some good stuff.
I have one more question. This is Jackie again. We've seen a lot of college students transfer from one place to the other, having to sit out, having different experiences with different coaches. Is that something that could affect their performance as well, or something that you talk about anywhere in your discussion points?
Absolutely. And, my question would be, well, why are they transferring? And I think there's several reasons. I think the school just wasn't a good fit. It was too big, too small, wasn't the right culture, changed their degrees. For some, I've worked with a number of athletes who just didn't make the transition away from home to a school far away. They didn't make that transition very well, so they want to come back. Others, it's issues with coaches, teammates. I actually had an athlete that I worked with this year who got slapped by a coach and transferred out. So there's different reasons, and an injury can send somebody back home, closer to home, to get support. So absolutely it can affect performance. But then I've also seen athletes leave a school and go to another school and just absolutely thrive and perform the best that they've ever performed. But I wrote an article last year called The Fall Season, Transition Times for Athletes, and it talks a lot about transitioning from junior varsity to varsity, or varsity to college, or college to NFL, and playing up and things like that, and why that's such a tough time for athletes and parents, and what we can do to help them.
Great. We can Google that article. Will we be able to find that?
It should be on my website on the blog page, or you could probably just Google that article, that name, The Fall Season Transition Times for Athletes, and it should pop right up.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions, moms, mothers, fathers, parents?
Yes, I have one last question, then I got to go. At what age or what stage in the child's life should they start receiving any type of counseling or psychiatric awareness, or just being mentally tough? What age and what stage?
If you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I would have given you a different answer. But I'm having athletes come to see me now at 10, 11, 12, which was kind of alarming for a while. But now it's just I've kind of normalized it. And I think part of it is because as adults, we're under so much pressure, with it was the economy and the stock market and the job market, and it still is for a lot of folks, and political differences and wars and global strife and pollution and global warming. It's all this pressure pushing down on us as adults, and our kids pick up on that. And sometimes we carry that onto the playing field or the practice field, and we're too hard on them. And so I saw all that going on. I was having kids having anxiety attacks on the basketball court and the football field and peewee football. And so if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have said 14 or 15. Now I'm saying 10, 11, 12, sadly,
Wow.
And I don't give the 10, 11, 12-year-old the same type of information that I give the 23-year-old Major League Baseball player. It's just a whole different deal because they haven't lived enough life. They can't articulate. A lot of times their parents sit in the room with them so I can get more out of them. And then on the other hand, I have some 12-year-olds I had one girl from Dallas came down to see me, and I was in tears listening to this girl articulate what was going on with her. She was amazing. So it's a whole spectrum. It's just a whole spectrum of awareness and ability to communicate and articulate. And, it's fascinating. Each kid's a puzzle, and you just have to figure them out.
Okay. Thank you.
You betcha.
Any other questions, Moms?
Are your services usually covered by insurance, or is it something that's usually financed by the parents themselves or the school?
It just depends on I don't do third-party billing because I used to, and I'm still out thousands of dollars from never getting paid for things I provided services for, and because we'd submit it to insurance. Insurance would say they were going to pay for it, and they wouldn't, and things like that. And so what I do now is I give the athletes an invoice. It has a procedure code. The diagnosis I use is called an adjustment disorder. It just means they're going through some situations in life that are creating stress. It's a real neutral diagnosis. And then the athletes or their parents submit it to their insurance companies, and then they reimburse the family. Some insurance companies pay for my services, some don't. You just have to check with your insurance company. Don't tell them it's for sports psychology. Just say, I would just want them to talk to somebody about what it's like to transition from high school to college or college to playing in professionals or whatever that might be, and see what they'll play. No, I never turn anybody away. I've never told anybody no for financial reasons. Which means I'll do whatever it takes to help somebody.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Robert. We really appreciate you coming on and providing such a detailed outline of some of the mental toughness, peak performance, and tips for parents, as well as discussing some of the injuries. And I guess you've mentioned how we get in contact with you. We can just go to your website.
You can either Google Robert Andrews Sports Psychology or the Institute of Sports Psychology, and it will point you. It's always the first thing that comes up. I think there's one paid ad for some hospital or something, and then me.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then
we'll
put your site on our webpage as well, the Mother's Athletes website as well, so that kind of like as a news and event thing, so there'll be easy access if they want to go to our website and click on the link as well.
Yeah, I'll send you my logo if you want, and you can just use that for the link. Would that work?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really cherish this opportunity. It's a great thing you're doing.
Okay.
Well, I hope that you would come back to speak to us again. It sounds like you have a lot of other topics that we were not able to speak about today, and hopefully you can come back and talk to us again.
I would love that. Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, you have a good Sunday evening and a great week, everyone. All right.
Okay, great.
You
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
I know we've run over a little bit, and I really appreciate everybody's patience, really appreciate everybody joining the call, the great questions everyone had, interacting with Robert, and just providing us with the time to allow him to share the information with us. Does anyone else want to talk about anything else? Because I got a note from one parent that she was wanted to talk kind of like an open forum of questions she had about something her athlete was going through. Is Kelly on the call? Okay, then maybe I'll just get with her after the call and find out. Maybe something happened. She wasn't able to join us today. Does anyone else have anything they want to talk about today? Hello?
Not me.
Okay. It's so quiet, and I know it's late, and I know we've taken up a lot of your time. So, Jackie, do you have anything you want to add? Okay. Well, maybe everybody dropped off the call and it's just me.
No, I'm on in that.
I'm still on with you in that.
I don't know, just checking. But anyway, I really wanted to say thanks to everyone that actually came up to the call tonight, and we have upgraded our website. So take a look at our website. If you'd like to register so you can make sure you get all the updates, we're going to do a lot of updating using website resources. We're looking forward to the next call, which is going to be in September. In September, we're going to have a recruiting actually, he's one of the top recruiters in the U.S. for basketball, and he's got a book that he's written about recruiting. He's actually on the McDonald's All-American committee as far as selection committee for basketball. So he's going to come on and kind of talk to us next month about some tips for recruiting, some things to consider as parents, and try to just provide us some additional resources in that area because we need to connect in that way as well.
Annette, did you say his name?
No, not yet. You want to go ahead and tell the name?
Clark Francis. Most of the basketball moms would probably know Clark.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. So we're looking forward to that next month. And also, if you have any topics or subjects that you'd like for us to try to address or resources that you're looking for specifically, we're always open to that type of feedback, so please send us some information. You can reach out to Jackie through cell phone, email. Just give us a call. We're open. We're always here. And again, I want to thank everyone for providing time and coming on to the call today. Do you have anything else you want to add, Jackie?
No, except I had terrible phone connection tonight, but I thought it was a fantastic call, and I really got a lot out of it. Just even my emotional self-control and awareness and how that pulls the energy from our athletes. So it's I thought it was a great call, and I'm looking forward to next month's call. I do ask the moms that are still on to please share with other moms, just so that we get all of the information out. And we had a great time in Vegas, and I don't know if you said anything about your time in Orlando, but we had a couple of moms come out, and I think we had several new moms join today, so we're excited.
Yeah, we did, and thank you, everyone. I went to Jackie did, as she mentioned, was in Las Vegas, and we met a lot of great moms. She met a lot of great moms there, and I was actually in Orlando at the AU Nationals this year, so we're trying to get out and network more with parents. And Michael Scott, thank you for bringing your group in, and we're looking forward to connecting later. And just want to say thanks to everyone.
No problem.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to end the call. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
You too.